Okay, so mine is for students to decide what a makerspace means to you, and we are going to pair it with a story. The objectives are, after the completion of this lesson, students will determine how a makerspace can bolster teamwork and will explain what a makerspace means to them. Students will explain how working as a team is beneficial, and students will construct a musical instrument out of materials that would have otherwise been thrown out. Students will determine the theme of the book, Ada's violin, and will interpret how the theme can apply to their own life. They will compare and contrast the life of Ada to his or her own life. And the primary resources are the book, Ada's violin, and a short little movie. So the book is Ada's Violin, the story of the Recycled Orchestra of Paraguay by Susan Hood. And then the illustrator is Sally Warren Comfort. Ada Rios grew up in a town made of trash. Every morning at dawn, Ada heard the first garbage trucks rumble and roll down the road to Catarura. Beep, beep, beep. Backing into the landfill, they tipped their loads up and crash. The trash came tumbling down, 1,500 tons each day. Ada and her friends watched as the gancheros, or recyclers, scrambled, tearing into plastic bags with long-handled hooks, pushing aside moldy produce, and grabbing anything they could recycle or sell. The going rates, 5 cents for a pound of cardboard, 10 cents for a pound of plastic. This noisy, stinking, sweltering slum was not the most nurturing neighborhood. Ada watched, eyes wide, but she didn't say much. And yet, she liked to imagine each garbage truck was a box of surprises. One never knew what might be inside. Her father had found appliances, toys, perfumes, and antique watches. One woman even discovered a small box full of gold jewelry. Little did Ada know there was a bigger surprise waiting for her in the landfill. Every day when Ada's parents went to work, Grandmother Miriam cared for Ada and her little sister, Noelia. Grandma loved to sing rock and roll songs from the 1960s. The girls grew up to the tunes of the Beatles, Simon and Garfunkel, and Creedence Clearwater Revival. Ada loved to sing too, but only when no one was listening. Ada's dad brightened the night with stories and songs of great musicians. He turned up the radio and pointed out the sounds each instrument made. Ada heard one above all others. Zing went the strings of the violin. When the girls started school, Grandma returned to work as a recycler, collecting bottles and cans in the city. Classes let out at noon, and young Ada was in charge of Noelia until her parents were done with work. At first, the girls stayed close to home, playing with Grandma Miriam's doggies and making sand cakes in the dirt. Soon, they joined their cousins, playing hide and seek or a game of handball in the streets. In time, they ventured farther afield, walking down the bodega to get candy. But Ada noticed the teenagers hanging out in the alleys, grumbling about life in the landfill looming ahead. What would happen to them, to her little sister? She watched as the older kids turned to gangs and got into fights. One day, when Ada was 11 years old, her grandmother saw a sign posted on the wall of a chapel. Violin, guitar, cello taught Thursdays at 8 a.m., Fabio Chavez. How Grandma had longed to learn music. Too late for her maybe, she thought, but not for her granddaughters. She signed them up without asking them, or their parents. Ada's heart sang out. Thanks to her abuela, she could leave her worries behind and learn to play. At the first class, the teacher, Fabio Chavez, had 3 guitars and 2 violins to share. Ada chose a violin right away, but 10 children had signed up. Frustrated, Ada and her friends found that there were not enough instruments to go around. And there was a bigger problem. Everyone quickly realized that the children would need to practice at home, but it wasn't safe to be seen with an expensive instrument in Kataura, where a violin is worth more than a house. Watching the children play amid broken glass and rusty metal, Senor Chavez knew he had to do something. He remembered the band called Les Luthiers that made its own instruments. That was it. He asked Nicolas Cola Gomez, a ganchero and carpenter, for help. Senor Gomez found a discarded drum with a big hole in it. What would he use to fix it? He picked through the trash and discovered an old X-ray film. Would that work? So now the rest of it is a video that we can watch.
It did. Senor Gomez kept experimenting, and others, like Tito Romero, helped. Inventing instruments wasn't easy, but they fiddled around, discovering which materials hit just the right notes. They transformed oil drums into cellos, water pipes into flutes, and packing crates into guitars. Soon there were enough instruments for all the children who wanted to play. Ada chose a violin made from an old paint can, an aluminum baking tray, a fork, and pieces of wooden crates. Worthless to thieves, it was invaluable to her. It was a violin of her very own. Senor Chavez set up a strict schedule of 3-hour lessons. The class had no classrooms, so they played outside, despite the 100-degree heat and sudden downpours. At first, Ada and the others struggled. Sharps and flats clanged and clashed. Playing an instrument is a process. It doesn't matter if one is rich or poor, ugly, fat, thin. You cannot learn to play an instrument overnight, Senor Chavez told the children. Some kids decided it was too much work and gave up, but not Ada. After lessons, she would practice at home, sometimes 2 hours a day. In time, the screeches, twangs, and tweets hit all the right notes. Their class became a small island where Chavez taught them to respect themselves and one another. Be kind. Always say please and thank you. Say you're sorry. Be dedicated when you commit to something, Senor Chavez told the children. Soon the ragtag crew of kids learned to tune in, to listen to one another, to band together. The recycled orchestra was born. From then on, there was something new in the air in Catura. Gancheros, trudging home from the landfill, might lift their heads to hear the sounds of Ada's violin, or the strains of Bebe's cello, or the strum of Noela's guitar. A symphony of sound helped to lift them beyond the heat, the stench, and their aching backs. With her violin, Ada could close her eyes and imagine a different life. She could soar on the high, bright, bittersweet notes to a place far away. She could be who she was meant to be. As Ada's skill grew, so did her confidence. Once timid, she now took center stage playing solos. She helped teach the younger children too. Her teachers and fellow students took note. When she was 12 years old, Ada was named a first violinist. Imagine, she was first at something. Shortly after, she and her 39 fellow musicians were invited to perform concerts in Catura and later in the nearby capital city of Asunción. Word of this extraordinary orchestra spread. Soon they were asked to perform in other cities and even other countries. Ada and her friends flew on their first airplane, stayed in their first hotel, swam in the bright blue waters of Rio de Janeiro, sampled their first pastries and pineapple, and saw sights they had never imagined. The world dazzled them, just as they dazzled the world. When Ada was 16, the orchestra received a very special invitation. They were asked to tour with a world-famous rock band. More than 35,000 people awaited them at their first concert stop in Bogota, Colombia. Ada was more than nervous. She didn't know how to enter or how to greet the audience. She went blank. She saw a giant stage with glaring lights and heard people screaming. But she didn't have to worry. As the recycled orchestra took the stage, the people who had paid to see the rock band cheered for them. The enormous audience sang and swayed to the music as the orchestra played, and as their performance came to a close, a crescendo of cheers, chants, and applause resounded across the park. The astonished kids bowed, grinning at one another. They had discovered the surprise waiting in the landfill. Buried in the trash was music, and buried in themselves was something to be proud of.
Okay. So some of the okay, so now the students will think about problems they have noticed in their own community, and in small groups of 3 or 4, they will share ways that they have solved or attempted to solve these problems in their community. So I've had students say things like, there are a lot of stray animals in my neighborhood, or stray cats tear up our trash at night. And after the book, we'll ask some questions such as, are there problems in your community? How do people react to problems that they face every day in your community? Have you ever had a unique way of solving a particular problem? Or have you ever asked help or have helped someone solve a problem? And then we're going to talk about the idea of a makerspace and how you can help others in your community solve problems. So they'll learn about the concept of a makerspace and discuss how communal area to tinker, build, and explore can help the community as a whole. They'll be prompted to think of items that can be recreated using materials that would otherwise be trashed or recycled. And then since in the book, the students make instruments, or the students get help to have instruments made, then we will be making instruments in a second. And then I also have another one of my primary resources. It's a really short clip that actually shows the students and what their instruments look like. Here it is.
Mi nombre es Ada Maribel Ríos Bogado, tengo 13 años y toco el violín.
Me llamo Juan Manuel Chávez, más conocido como Baby, tengo 19 años y toco el cello. Este cello está hecho de una lata de aceite, la madera tirada en la basura y las clavijas son de una vieja cuchara para golpear la carne y para hacer el ñoquis. Y suena así. La comunidad como Cateura no es un lugar para tener un violín. De hecho, un violín cuesta más que su casa.
En ese grupo acá mismo encontramos el colado de violín. Y ese empezamos los instrumentos reciclados. familia que acá vive recicla todo lo que hay en la basura y se vende. No pensaba antes que yo voy a hacer esos instrumentos. Y me siento demasiado feliz cuando estoy viendo a un niño que está tocando un violín reciclado.
Cuando yo escucho el sonido del violín, siento como mariposa en el estómago, así una sensación, que no sé cómo voy a explicar.
La orquesta de instrumentos reciclados es una orquesta que toca instrumentos hechos con la basura. 1, 2, 3.
Y mi vida sería, sin la música, estaría de Corea y por ahí.
La gente se da cuenta que no tenemos que tirar la basura muy fácilmente. No tenemos que desechar a las personas muy fácilmente.
Okay. Okay, so some of the discussion questions will be, how does Ada and her community overcome the problem in their town made of trash? How did music change her life? How did her music make other people feel? How did Ada become a great violinist? And why do you think Mr. Chavez offered music lessons? And then we'll also talk about the theme of the story, Ada's Violin. It has some students, the students will complete a sentence statement. The author's message to the reader is, some of the themes are innovation, teamwork, and hope. And then the makerspace activity will have some videos of people playing instruments, and then we will have access to books about music and instruments, and then internet-ready devices for quick reference. So books, and then also things they can access online. And then the materials will be out and ready to use, and students will work with a partner to plan their design. So some of the materials could be, of course, like toilet paper, tubes, different kinds of tape, and bottle caps, and a plastic water bottle, and then any kind of cardboard. And then I also have this, which it's just a bag of chips, and if you fold it, it's really strong. So they will also be able to use, as they're making the project, they will use the tablet camera to document step by step the process. And then they will tinker with their instruments until they can perform a song to their liking. They will use the photos to create a procedural. After, we will use electronic devices to access online school and public library catalogs to see what books or digital media are available that connect to our topic. We have upcycled musical instruments out of trash, and we're wondering if there are any other household items that we can create out of unlikely materials. Where can we find those materials? What other materials could we use? And how else can we get ideas and ask for help? So some of the questions will be, how could we make our own instruments? How can we find materials to make instruments? And then some other books on creating and making inventions is Girls Think of Everything, Story of Ingenious Inventions by Women by Catherine Thimish, The Most Magnificent Thing by Ashley Spires, This Book Isn't Safe, Lucy and the String, The Book of Mistakes, and this one's a nonfiction one, Maker Lab, 28 Super Cool Projects. And then some additional resources will be other library books about children that have helped their community in some way. So A Boy and a Jaguar is one example. Malala, activist for girls' education. Six Dots, a story about young Louis Braille. Manual Stream, the true story of Manuel Ofosu Yeboah and others. And then on the Padlet, then I made a Padlet where they can look at other resources. So this is the Landfill Harmonic, the short movie that we watched. Ada's Violin was a nominee for a Texas Bluebonnet Award. So here's some information on that and on the award. This is a longer version of Landfill Harmonic, and this is one where they were on 60 Minutes. So this is the full-on documentary, and then some more information about Ada's Violin, a TEDx video they were in, and the band that they performed with was Metallica. So those videos are available as well. And then just some more information on the book and an interview with the author. And that's it.